Well, today is Tuesday, October the 6th, 2020, and it is my joy to be bringing you today's devotional commentary from my office at Hillsdale Baptist Church in Tampa, Florida. The title of my devotional today is, Sir, I Have No Man, and is taken from the Gospel of John, chapter 5. The words, Sir, I have no man, are words spoken by a man whom the scriptures describe as having had an infirmity 38 years. And Jesus and his disciples had returned to Jerusalem for the Passover in John 5 and verse 1. And making his way to the temple, Jesus passed through the sheep gate. There was a pool of water there. And in our story, it was located near the sheep gate, through which sheep were led into the city to the Temple Mount to be sacrificed. Now, the pool was called Bethesda, meaning house of mercy, and was shaded by 5 porches. As Jesus passed by, he gazed upon a miserable lot of souls who had gathered there. We read in chapter 5 and verse 3, a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving or the stirring of the water. Why was this crowd of suffering souls waiting at the pool called Bethesda? Well, John writes they were waiting for the moving of the water, for an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. And whosoever then was the first after the troubling of water to step in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. In the midst of this multitude of needy souls, there was one man who had been afflicted with an ailment 38 years. Described as having an infirmity, he was suffering from a chronic, debilitating disease, perhaps even a stroke. John chapter 5 and verse 7 describes the same man as impotent. An earlier devotion revealed that Jesus knew what was in man, John chapter 2 and verse 5. And so in John chapter 5 and verse 6, we see that Jesus knew the man and his suffering. We read in verse 6, Jesus saw him lie and knew that he had been now a long time in that case, and taking pity on the man, Jesus asked, Wilt thou be made whole? Though his outward affliction was obvious, it was the anguish of the man's soul that I find troubling, for he said he had no man. There was no one who looked upon his helpless state and waited with him at the pool, eager to assist him to the healing waters when they were stirred. No man had mercy. None were willing, who were suffering, were themselves willing to defer their distress and prefer the man who had suffered 38 years. I invite you to consider with me 3 divine attributes Jesus exhibited on that day. The first is in John 5 and verse 14, where we see that Jesus was omniscient. He saw the man, and he knew not only how long he had been afflicted, but also the reason for his suffering. The Lord says in verse 14, Sin no more, lest a worse thing come unto thee. Now there's a second divine attribute, and that is grace. Only one man was the object of Jesus' grace that day. Though Jesus knew the man and his sin, he took pity on the man and he asked, Wilt thou be made whole? Now why was this man, when there were so many who were suffering, why this man? He was no more deserving than any other, but it was grace, not merit, that moved Jesus to heal the man. An interesting side note, when asked if he wished to be healed, he answered the man with the affliction with a despairing grievance, saying, I have no man. And thirdly, Jesus displayed authority over disease and divine omnipotence when he commanded the man, Rise, take up thy bed, and walk. Immediately the man was made whole, and he took up his bed and walked. 38 years he had suffered. And with the power of Jesus' spoken word, he was instantaneously made whole. You know, there is much more to this story, especially the scene that follows when the religious hypocrites of that day rebuked the man who had been healed for carrying his bed on the Sabbath. You know, and I wonder, How many times those religious leaders had passed by the pool of Bethesda and never took pity on the multitude of souls gathered there? How many hurting souls do you and I pass every day, but we never take pity on their sorrows? They may not be sick, maimed, blind, or crippled, but do we pass by insensitive to their troubles? How many might say, I have no man who cares for my soul? God bless you.